I knew we weren't alone when I found the footprints circling our tent. Footprints that hadn't been there when we went to sleep. These chilling words come from Sarah, the lone survivor of what became known as the Blackwood Forest incident. What began as a peaceful camping trip ended with 2 people missing and 1 permanently traumatized. Today, we're examining 3 horrifying camping encounters verified by local authorities as authentic cases. What makes these stories particularly disturbing isn't just what occurred, but how ordinary each trip seemed before everything went wrong. Perfect weather, experienced campers, familiar terrain, yet each excursion transformed into a nightmare that continues to haunt survivors today. In 2017, Sarah and her 4 friends were drawn to Blackwood Forest by its reputation for untouched wilderness and breathtaking views. The 5 college seniors wanted one last adventure before graduation, and the remote forest preserve in northern Michigan seemed perfect. What they didn't research were the local stories about hikers who entered certain sections of the woods and experienced strange occurrences. Their first day unfolded as planned. They found a clearing 3 miles from the nearest access road and efficiently established their camp. James photographed rare birds and unusual rock formations, while Megan identified wild berries with her guidebook. By dusk, their semicircle of tents surrounded a carefully constructed fire pit. As darkness settled, the cheerful daytime sounds gave way to deeper silence. They gathered around the fire, sharing stories about college until one by one, they retreated to their tents. Sarah was last, turning in around midnight to a forest peaceful, except for occasional owl hoots. Sarah jolted awake at precisely 3:17 a.m. She checked her watch in confusion. Something had pulled her from sleep. Scratching sounds moving around her tent, like fingernails against fabric. Then came whispers, too quiet to understand, but unmistakably human. Most disturbing were the deliberate footsteps circling their campsite in a methodical pattern. "Guys," she whispered, nudging Lisa awake. "I think someone's out there." When Lisa stirred, the sounds vanished. They woke the others, but after 20 minutes of normal forest sounds, James declared it was probably just a raccoon. Morning validated Sarah's fears. A perfect circle of footprints, too narrow for humans, too structured for animals, surrounded their camp. Their food container had been opened, and items rearranged into bizarre configurations. Granola bars in tiny pyramids, trail mix in spirals, fruit positioned to form what looked uncomfortably like a face. "Maybe other campers are messing with us," Mike suggested without conviction. They agreed to move deeper into the forest, a decision Sarah would later recognize as their first step into a trap. The second night, Sarah spotted a figure at the tree line, tall, unnaturally thin, wrong in its proportions, that retreated when James aimed his flashlight. 3 searches revealed nothing but disturbed underbrush. By morning, they packed quickly. Their relief upon reaching their SUV dissolved when the engine refused to start. The new battery was dead. Cell phones showed no signal. Familiar landmarks appeared in the wrong order as they tried to walk out, forcing another night in the woods. The third morning, Mike and James were missing. In their place, strange angular symbols scratched into the dirt glowed faintly in the dawn light. "I think it's hurting us," Sarah whispered to Lisa. "Every time we've tried to leave, we've gone east, exactly where it wants us. Some threats herd you where they want you to go, but others create a prison without walls." At Echo Lake, Michael and his brother discovered that the most terrifying wilderness experience isn't being stalked by a predator. It's when reality itself refuses to let you leave. In 2018, Michael Dawson, an experienced backcountry guide with 15 years of wilderness skills, took his younger brother David on a weekend camping trip to Echo Lake in Idaho's Sawtooth National Forest. The location balanced accessibility with isolation, a 3-hour hike from the nearest access point, giving them the pristine shoreline to themselves. Their first day passed pleasantly with fishing and exploring. The brothers established their campsite on a natural rise overlooking both the lake and surrounding pine forest. It was the kind of day you remember when you're stuck in the office. Perfect temperature, clear skies, and absolute peace, David later described. That peace vanished at exactly 11:42 p.m. Michael, documenting their trip in his journal, recorded the precise moment when the forest went completely silent. The background chorus of insects, owl calls, nocturnal rustlings, everything ceased simultaneously. The silence had physical weight, Michael wrote. Pressure built in my ears like being underwater, crushing against my eardrums. The absence of sound became a presence itself, dense and suffocating. This oppressive quiet held for 9 minutes before breaking into what the brothers initially mistook for wind. Yet nothing moved, not trees, not the lake's surface. The sound developed into what David described as howling, but hollow, like it was coming through a long tunnel. They huddled in their tent as the unnatural sound circled until dawn. Morning revealed 7 stone arrangements encircling their campsite, geometric patterns of increasing complexity. The nearest formed a simple triangle. The furthest created an intricate spiral of balanced rocks. "We didn't hear anyone approach," David insisted. "Some stones weigh several pounds. No animal could have done this." Above, ravens flew in a perfect circle over their camp, while deer stood motionless along the tree line, all facing the brothers. Michael's compass needle spun wildly, never settling. Their GPS showed impossible coordinates, placing them simultaneously in multiple locations. Even Michael's reliable analog watch had stopped at 11:42 p.m. Determined to leave, they packed and walked in the direction Michael was certain led to the trailhead. After 3 hours, they emerged to find themselves at their original campsite, their extinguished fire still smoking. The second night brought bone-chilling cold, despite being July. Their campfire repeatedly extinguished itself without wind or moisture. Most disturbing were the voices from the darkness, perfect mimicries of their own, repeating conversations from earlier that day. Michael noticed subtle environmental changes. A lightning-struck pine had shifted position. The lake's shoreline had altered its curve, and even distant mountain peaks seemed rearranged. The woods have always kept secrets, some buried just inches beneath the soil. When Jenna, Alex, and Taylor stumbled upon an oddly convenient clearing in Colorado's Pike National Forest, they had no idea they were walking into someone else's unfinished nightmare, one that had been patiently waiting for new players. The clearing seemed meticulously maintained, despite its remote location, a level area protected by natural rock formations, with a stream nearby. This unnatural perfection immediately set them on edge. Alex mentioned how strange it was that the spot looked maintained, 6 miles from any official campground. Jenna later told investigators. The grass was shorter, 3 distinct fire rings spaced evenly apart, fallen branches stacked neatly at the clearing's edge. They chose one fire ring and began setting up. While hammering a stake, Taylor's mallet struck something metallic. Digging revealed an old Coleman lantern alongside a weathered backpack, its fabric deteriorated from years of exposure, silent witnesses to a previous tragedy. The name tag was barely visible, Taylor said. Daniel Corwin, written in permanent marker, with Summer Trip 99. The discovery cast a shadow over their campsite, as if those faded letters were a warning they couldn't yet understand. As darkness fell and they gathered around their fire, Alex suddenly tilted his head. Does anyone else hear that music? Faintly, eerily misplaced in the forest's silence, came the sound of Earth Angel by the Penguins, crackling as if played through vintage speakers before eventually fading away. The next morning, Jenna found 7 Polaroid photographs arranged in a line near the tree line. They showed 3 young people at the same campsite, dated June 1999. The photos told a disturbing progression. Friends camping, then one pointing fearfully toward the trees, their tents forming a triangle, strange lights among trees, 2 remaining people looking terrified, and finally, an empty campsite with footprints that simply stopped. That afternoon, they returned from hiking to find their own tents, rearranged into a triangle formation, identical to the Polaroid. That's when I started photographing everything, Alex explained. Night brought flashlight beams between distant trees and disembodied voices calling Daniel, Rachel, and Stephen. By morning, they attempted to leave, but repeatedly found themselves back at their campsite after hours of hiking. Reviewing his photos, Alex noticed the pattern. The people in the Polaroids, their campsite kept changing exactly like ours. They did what we were doing, setting up tents, sitting around the fire, taking the same trails. Understanding they were trapped in the same loop, Alex realized the empty final Polaroid showed their potential fate. We deliberately broke the pattern. Different tent positions, different fire management, different hiking direction. Their resistance worked. The forest shifted, and within an hour, they found their car, escaping the cycle that had claimed others before them. What these cases teach us is something far more unsettling than standard wilderness dangers. Beyond bears, weather, and getting lost lies a category of threat we rarely discuss: the truly unexplained. Park rangers and search and rescue personnel regularly encounter unusual cases that defy conventional explanation. Their experiences reveal how traditional safety protocols, while necessary, are sometimes insufficient against the unknown. The survivors lived because they trusted their instincts when rational explanations failed, highlighting our primal vulnerability in wild places. As you prepare for outdoor adventures, research thoroughly and remember that readiness extends beyond equipment. Developing mental flexibility and trusting your intuition could be crucial when facing phenomena outside our understanding. How much of nature's danger remains beyond our comprehension?